The following podcast contains mature language and discussions that are not suitable for younger audiences. The opinions voiced in this podcast are our own. We are not experts on the topic we present, but have conducted our own research. The content in this episode is disturbing in nature and may be uncomfortable for some listeners. If true crime just isn't your thing, then this episode might not be for you. Listener discretion is advised. The city of Abbotsford, British Columbia was calm on Friday, October 13th, 1995. Two teenagers were coming back from a party and decided to go to their friend's house as they weren't ready to call it a night. When they were en route, the teenagers were suddenly attacked by someone who jumped out of the bushes with a baseball bat. One of the girls managed to make it on foot to a nearby hospital while the other disappeared. In this episode, we're going to look at what happened the night of the attack, what happened to the other teenager, and why the perpetrator taunted police and media about what they did in the following months. Welcome to the Strange and Undecided podcast. Welcome back to the Strange and Undecided podcast. I'm your producer and host, Jarrett, joined by my co-hosts,
Patrick and Brando.
Welcome, guys. All right, so the episode we're covering tonight was actually a recommendation from Brandon. And how did you come across this?
I wish I had an elaborate story on this, but my wife gets all the credit here because she was the one who mentioned the name to me. But I am super excited to finally contribute. So there we go. Hopefully she can come up with a few other names.
Shout out to Brandon's wife.
Here.
All right, so I don't want to explain too much about this case before getting into it. It's kind of one that'll unfold as we go. So without further ado, let's begin. Abbotsford, a city located in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, Canada, was primarily known for its strong agricultural roots and peaceful rural town feel. In 1995, Abbotsford was expanding rapidly. It still maintained its agricultural background and small town feel, but it was also becoming more populated as people had more recently decided to move there from Vancouver to find more affordable living. It was just over 70 kilometers away, so people still had reasonable access to the big city. Along with the population growth, there was an increase in community diversity and infrastructure expansion, which led to the city transforming from a small, quaint town to a bustling urban center. The crime rate in Abbotsford actually decreased in 1995 compared to previous years. This might have given people the idea that the town was safe and nothing would happen to them. On the night of October 13th, 1995, or Friday the 13th, two teenage girls by the names of Tanya Smith, who was 16, and Misty Cockrell, who was 15, were coming back from a party when they decided the night was not yet over. They were close friends and had spent the day together leading up to the party. They made the decision to continue the fun and were walking to a friend's house located near the former MSA or Matsqui Sumas Abbotsford Hospital on McCallum Road in Abbotsford, which was a suburban part of the city. They were completely unaware of the danger that was lurking around them. The teenagers were scared by a man who approached them armed with a baseball bat. The man commanded the girls to go into the bushes and made them undress. Tanya did as she was told, but Misty fought back. She was able to get a hold of the baseball bat and hit the attacker with it, but unfortunately it was not enough, as she was overpowered quickly and then he beat her unconscious with the bat. Sometime later, Misty regained consciousness and her friend as well as the assailant were gone. She tried her best to collect herself and fled the scene, severely injured but alive. She stumbled to the nearby hospital where she was treated for her head injuries. Due to the severity of Misty's head injuries, she had a difficult time answering police questions, and she kept drifting in and out of consciousness. She was fighting for her life at this point, and it wasn't known if she would make it or not. She was able to provide police with a description of what happened, roughly where it happened, and what the attacker looked like. This information would be crucial to the investigation down the road. The beginning of this case reminds me of episode 31, which was the Leah Souza case that we covered, where her mother sustained head injuries during the attack and unfortunately was not able to recall any details or anything that could help police find the suspect. Fortunately, in this case, Misty was able to recall this information. She described the attacker as a Caucasian man in his late 20s or early 30s with a medium build and dark hair. However, she was unable to tell police what happened to her friend, Tanya. This information that was given to police unfortunately provided them with no immediate suspects, leaving them to continue their search. The Abbotsford Police Department responded quickly to the disappearance of Tanya, but the case initially seemed like an abduction. The horrifying truth of what actually happened would be revealed in the following days. Three days after the attack, a fisherman decided to cast out on the Vetter River. He was enjoying his day when he noticed something floating in the water nearby. Upon inspection, he discovered the nude body of a woman floating, who would later be identified as Tanya Smith. An autopsy was conducted on Tanya's body, and it was determined that she had drowned, likely after being incapacitated by the blow to her head. The forensic evidence indicated that Tanya had sustained massive head trauma from the bat and was likely unconscious or incapacitated when she drowned. This was very similar to what had happened to Misty, but she made it to the hospital instead. According to the official autopsy report, the cause of death was drowning. However, the doctors that conducted the autopsy stated that Tanya likely would have succumbed to her head injuries due to how severe they were. When she was placed in the water, she was still breathing, hence why there was water in her lungs. There was also evidence of sexual assault and a bite mark on her breast. This is only a small glimpse into the trauma she sustained and only begins to show the brutality of the attack. Despite there being no immediate suspects, police set out to investigate where Tanya and Misty were first confronted by the individual. After some searching based on Misty's description, they fortunately were able to find the location, but there wasn't much there in terms of forensic evidence, linking a potential suspect to the attack. All they found was an earring belonging to one of the two teenagers. The police were back to square one, but something happened next that nobody expected. Following the discovery of Tanya's body in the water, police received a phone call from someone. Over the phone, they bragged to police about killing Tanya and commented saying that her breast tasted nice. This information was not made public, but Tanya's body did have a bite mark on one of her breasts, as I had mentioned before. This was a detail only the killer would have known. Police traced the call to a payphone and quickly descended on the area. Unfortunately, the killer had left by the time police arrived. They dusted the payphone for fingerprints, which seemed like a fruitless task, and as expected, they didn't find anything useful. After this, the killer called police again, mocking them, asking them, "Do you think I'd be stupid enough to leave fingerprints behind?" Clearly, he had been watching the payphone when the police arrived.
The ball's on him. Holy. This is like a scene from a movie.
Could you imagine just being in one of those police officers' shoes during this investigation? Somebody calling, saying, "Hey, I did this murder." You go to find them. They're gone. You go back to the station, then receive another call mocking you. It does seem like it's out of a movie. This doesn't seem like it's real.
Well, as the officer, you're supposed to be 3 steps ahead, right?
Right.
That's scary.
In the weeks that followed, the killer made more phone calls to the police, providing specific, unpublicized details about the attack, boasting about what he had done.
So every time he calls, he's on a different payphone?
Yes.
If I was the cops, I would have just Put a camera on every single payphone in town at that point.
That'd pretty much be impossible. Like, it's 1995.
I was going to say in that day, yeah.
How many payphones would exist in the city of Abbotsford at that time?
Hundreds.
Oh, lots. That's how you called, right? Like,
yeah, cell phones at this point are in their infancy, and the primary method of communication would be a payphone. So there's hundreds of them all throughout the city, and there's no possible way to track it. Even in modern day cities right now, there's not that much surveillance. It's not like the UK, for example, where they have CCTV footage or CCTV cameras everywhere and footage is readily accessible. This is a different time. The killer seemed to revel in the fact that law enforcement was struggling to make progress on the case. He even told police that he was driving around looking for his next victim. If one thing was certain, though, this person was a dangerous psychopath that needed to be stopped before he struck again. Police tried everything they could. They even had Misty describe the features of the killer to a sketch artist and had a composite done. The sketch showed a middle-aged man with thinning brown hair and a mustache. Police published the sketch in the news and it turned up some leads. One of those leads that seemed promising led to someone named George Evenden, who was identified as being in the area, bore a striking resemblance to the composite, and was identified by somebody as being responsible for another sexual assault. Police believe they had their suspect. However, after collecting his DNA, a dental impression, and conducting a thorough interrogation, they believe that he had nothing to do with the murder. The DNA results would end up coming back 2 months later and were found not to be a match. After this, they released George. The killer hadn't phoned police in a while, and 3 months had passed since the attack. In January of 1996, police were no closer to finding the suspect. However, they weren't giving up. They came up with a different, unconventional tactic. Unbeknownst to the public, they asked the local newspaper to publish a story basically saying that the killer must have moved away as the harassing phone calls stopped and there were no new victims. That was all done in an attempt to anger him and draw him out, hoping that he would slip up and make a mistake. Well, it definitely angered him, and his next move shocked the entire city of Abbotsford. At the local radio station, the radio broadcaster received a call from someone saying to go look at the radio station's car outside. The radio broadcaster assumed that maybe someone hit it and went out to look. When he approached the vehicle, he noticed something on the hood of the car. As he got closer, he said it looked like a large, grayish object. When he got to the car, he was horrified with what he was looking at. It was the gravestone of Tanya Smith. The killer stole the headstone from the cemetery where Tanya was buried, defaced the headstone by writing all over it, and placed it on the vehicle outside of the radio station. Once again, there were no witnesses and there was no evidence leading to who this deranged person was.
okay, aren't those massive and really heavy?
Yes,
Unless he has help, how on earth does he go and throw that on a car?
that's a great question.
And without anyone seeing it? Like, you can't just carry that. Would you be dragging it? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess he was big enough and strong enough to do so.
That is ballsy. He must have been damn confident not to get caught doing something like that.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, they stirred the pot, right? Like, it got him going. And
But that is an important clue. He must have been big and strong enough to do something like that.
Yeah, that's a good observation.
I don't think I've literally ever heard of any, but like serial killer or anything. I don't think I've ever heard of anything being done like that before.
Yeah, reading this case for me personally, I've never heard of a story like this before.
And then doing it for the radio show host, then he'll just blast that all over the radio, right? Like,
That's straight out of a movie.
It shows here that this guy clearly wants attention, hence why he was calling in the first place.
mm-hmm.
Like, if you look at it from a psychological standpoint, he gets gratification from all this attention. So he's
Mhm.
trying to find ways to shock. It's like the shock factor. And if he gets people going, then that in turn, he gets some kind of high out of that.
That was shocking, all right.
Additionally, on February 21st, 1996, the killer decided to throw a note wrapped around a pair of pliers through a window of a random Abbotsford home. The contents of the note included his confession to the murder and assault, and also mentioned 3 other similar crimes that police confirmed were ongoing cases. I will post the note contents in the show notes for those of you who want to read it. Police searched the fingerprint database, but unfortunately, no matches came up. The high of finding this piece of evidence was quickly stripped away by the realization that this person was not in their database. More work had to be done. The decision was made to broadcast publicly the phone calls that were made to police by the killer in hopes that someone might recognize the voice. And it paid off. A woman recognized the voice and got her family to listen to it as well. They all agreed it sounded like someone they knew very well, one of their own family members, a man by the name of Terry Driver. Terry Driver was born on January 25th, 1965 in Canada, putting him at 31 years old at the time. He was the son of Grant Driver and Audrey Tighe. His father was a former and highly decorated Vancouver police officer. At one point in time, Terry was even a Boy Scout leader. He was also married and had 2 children. According to the people closest to him, as well as acquaintances, he was a perfectly normal guy. Easy to get along with, nothing wrong with him. Despite his father's profession and reputation, or his perceived normal demeanor, Terry had a much darker side that had finally bubbled to the surface.
Would you turn in your own son?
It'd be the right thing to do. You can't let somebody continue to inflict harm on a community for your own selfish reasons. It's a matter of if you're going to be selfish or not. What would you do?
Well, that's interesting because it's like, were you raised right because your mom's doing the right thing by turning you in? Or were you raised wrong because she raised a killer?
Well, the other kids turned out fine. So with people like this, it's not all boiled down to any trauma or poor upbringing, for example. Like if you look at Jeffrey Dahmer, for example, he did not come from a broken home. He came from a slightly dysfunctional, but still nobody abused him growing up. His dad didn't abuse him. He was exposed to stuff, but it wasn't like to the level of, oh, these were the worst parents in the world and that's why he turned out the way he did. People have worse parenting and they turn out perfectly fine regardless of the circumstances of their upbringing. How does this all happen? Does it come down to how somebody was raised or is it biological? And that's always been the question that people ask when it comes to people like this. Police went to the residence of Terry Driver and told him someone had called in saying he looked like the composite drawing. Police did not disclose that it was his mother that called. He explained that he looked nothing like the drawing. However, police rebounded that they were following up on every lead they could regardless and were asking people to submit a DNA test, fingerprinting, or a polygraph to rule them out.
He's right, though. He looks nothing like the drawing.
Terry refused all 3, which was immediately suspicious. Police told him that if he was innocent, he needed to come down to the station and there would be nothing to worry about. Terry Driver consulted his lawyer next and agreed to come down to the police station. He refused to provide DNA, but agreed to give his fingerprints. And that was the only thing that he agreed to do. Everything else he denied.
And they had the fingerprint from the tape, right?
Exactly. Little did he know police had the killer's fingerprints from the piece of tape recovered from the note. A piece of evidence not made public. Police took Terry's fingerprints and compared them to the fingerprint on the piece of tape. They were very quickly able to determine it was an exact match. Police believed they had finally caught the perpetrator. But this wasn't the only piece of evidence matched. There was much more.
What a dummy. How do you forget to take your fingers off the piece of tape?
I think he was angered by what was published in the newspaper, and this was exactly what police wanted. They wanted him to be driven by his emotion and to make a mistake, which is exactly what he did. He wasn't cold and calculated like he was before. He was wearing his emotions on his sleeve and doing things because he was pissed, which for people like this is usually their downfall. When Tanya was originally discovered, police had tried their best to preserve her body and retain any forensic evidence that could be left behind by the killer. They went to great lengths, such as placing her hands in paper bags, to attempt to keep any evidence left behind stable. For example, if she fought off and scratched her attacker, DNA could be located underneath her nails. While no forensic evidence was found here, they were able to obtain a semen sample. There was also a bite mark on her breast. Miraculously, DNA was left behind in the bite mark and the forensic team were able to recover it. As mentioned before, a fingerprint was found on the piece of tape attached to a note wrapped around the pliers which driver had thrown through a window to taunt the police. All of this, along with trace evidence found in Terry's car that linked him to having Tanya in the car, would ultimately prove that Terry Driver was in fact the Abbotsford killer.
With the bite mark, would they be able to, because it looks like he's got a missing tooth there on the front, would they be able to pick that out from the bite mark?
I believe they did a dental analysis and found that it was a match as well, which is interesting because that's how Ted Bundy was caught.
Yeah.
Because he had such a unique kind of dental arrangement and they matched that up perfectly. So it wouldn't work for everybody, I don't think, but certain people who have...
They're kind of unique. Yeah, unique, yeah.
Yeah, I think it would work. So in this case, it did as well. On March 25th, 1996, Terry Driver was arrested. Police would later state that while he was being arrested, Terry expressed no emotion or remorse for any of his actions. This fits with the psychological profile developed by investigators for the killer, which we will get into shortly. Terry was charged with first-degree murder, attempted murder, sexual assault causing bodily harm, aggravated assault, and robbery. At the trial, Misty Cockrell's testimony was one of the core pieces of evidence used against Terry. Misty was able to recall the events of the attack in great detail. Misty's testimony, combined with police evidence, detailed the events of October 13th as follows. Terry Driver confronted both Tanya and Misty and demanded that they strip naked. He held a baseball bat and ordered them to comply. It was noted that his behavior showed typical signs of a predatory sexual offender seeking to humiliate and control his victims. Terry began sexually assaulting Tanya, but Misty attempted to fight back. Terry had set the bat down on the ground, and Misty grabbed it and hit him with it. A struggle ensued, which led Terry to overpower Misty and beat her over the head with the bat, knocking her unconscious. After rendering Misty unconscious, Driver then sexually assaulted Tanya Smith. After assaulting Tanya, Terry used the bat to inflict severe head injuries to her. Terry then drove Tanya in his car, leaving Misty for dead, and went to the Vedder River, which was a secluded fishing spot about 15 to 20 kilometers away from Abbotsford, where he then dumped her body.
What did Misty think about finally seeing Terry Driver in person? Because they don't match the sketches that she had in mind.
That's a good question. I think when she saw him, she knew it was him, but there really wasn't much said about kind of her reaction towards him in court for seeing him the first time. But it is something that is important to note, though, because what she described as the person that attacked her, it looks nothing like Terry Driver.
Because clearly she had some head trauma and she wouldn't remember vivid exact details.
And it was dark at night, right?
And of course she was terrified and all those things put together. Like how good of a memory could you have?
Yeah, so I think that's what police kind of ended up chalking it up to, saying that the reason why the composite was so different was because of her sustained injuries and it might have altered her memory a little bit. But they also said even people who didn't receive blunt force trauma to their heads or receive any kind of head trauma, the eyewitness testimony that they provide can be unreliable due to a number of factors like the ones that you mentioned, but there could also be like being in these really stressful situations, as well as the malleability of memory in general. So things can change very drastically and end up not being accurate. In addition, forensic experts testified about the DNA evidence found on Tanya's body, the fingerprint on the piece of tape, and the blood evidence linking Terry to the crime. Terry's defense tried their best to explain the reasoning for the crime as originating from various mental disorders. They focused on specific disorders such as Tourette's syndrome, ADHD, and OCD, and explained to the court that Terry was unable to resist when he had violent or sexual urges. This would be criticized heavily by the Crown or the prosecution as not having anything to do with what actually transpired. Terry's version of events compared to what was already said was very different. He said that he was not responsible for the attack on Tanya or Misty. Instead, he was walking and found them after the attack had already happened. He said they were both unconscious and one girl was naked. He was unable to resist his urges due to his mental health conditions and had sex with her. At some point, he said he noticed that she had stopped breathing. He panicked, thinking he might have left evidence on her and people might think that he killed her, and instead put Tanya into his car and then drove Misty to the hospital. After that, he took Tanya to the Vedder River and threw her into the water. The court did not buy his version of events because it did not match any of the forensic evidence. Misty was also seen walking into the hospital bloodied by herself. The entire time he testified, he was exceptionally cold in his demeanor, which was noticed by the court and was deeply disturbing. Terry also left out the entire part about taunting the police after Tanya had been murdered.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Throughout the trial, Misty stayed strong and was not swayed by the presence of her attacker and the killer of her friend. Misty stated that she could see him smiling at her when she was testifying on the stand, but she didn't let him get to her. Her bravery and strength not only helped bring justice to her friend Tanya, but would prove crucial in trial. The verdict? Terry Driver was found guilty of first-degree murder for the killing of Tanya Smith, as well as attempted murder, sexual assault, and aggravated assault for his attack on Misty. It was noted by the judge that he could not find the words to describe the horrific caliber of his crimes. His cold-blooded behavior and the brutality led to his conviction. In 1997, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years for the murder of Tanya Smith, the maximum sentence in Canada, and would concurrently serve 10 years in prison for the attempted murder of Misty Cockrell.
Did he also get a fine for the gravestone?
I mean, I think that would be the robbery charge because he stole it from the cemetery. So that's one of the charges as well. But I think with everything else that happened, it didn't stick. It was just something he was charged with, but didn't actually get
Convicted?
convicted. Thank you.
Yeah, because defiling a gravestone, isn't that a crime?
It is. So what's different about this case, and one that we haven't covered yet, is the level of psychopathy and predatory behavior demonstrated by the individual. Here it's Terry Driver. Both behavioral experts and forensic psychologists were asked to analyze the killer's actions to see if they could help determine a psychological profile. They came to the consensus that he exhibited behavior that lacked empathy, was cold and calculated, arrogant, highly narcissistic, and manipulative. This was highlighted by his taunting, which began almost immediately in the case. One of the most significant pieces of Terry's psychological profile was his complete and utter lack of remorse. When he was interviewed by police, he came across as being detached and couldn't express any guilt for the crimes that he committed. Terry also showed behavior that was incredibly sadistic. He even attended Tanya's funeral before anyone knew he was a suspect and brought his children with him. This was confirmed by police as it was caught on video. This sadistic behavior continued as he taunted the police over the phone and bragged about what he had done, as well as the defacement of Tanya's gravestone.
So what was this guy like in his personal life? What was he like as a father?
Just a normal guy. Nobody had any idea that he could be this way. Not anybody in his family. So he truly had a double life in this case.
Wonder what he was like growing up, according to his family and friends and teachers.
He was a bit of a loner for the most part. He kind of just stuck to himself, which is kind of typical of these kinds of people. They really don't fit in with anybody else. And it isn't until the later years that they kind of just get referred to as, oh, he's normal, kind of quiet, keeps to himself. They learned to kind of live in their own skin, so to speak. Terry stole the gravestone from the cemetery, defaced it by writing all over it, and placed it on top of a car outside of a radio station. This kind of behavior almost seemed to be like he was mocking the grief of the family and the community. He was provoked in a sense by police and had to send them a message that he was in control of the situation, not them. The humiliation and torture he inflicted on others gave him gratification. This blatant disregard for any sort of humanity, in conjunction with what I mentioned previously, are consistent with people who have antisocial personality disorders, or ASPD. Do you have any experience with people with that?
No, but I agree with that.
All of this psychological profiling led the courts to the decision of giving Terry the designation of a dangerous offender. So what does this mean? The designation meant that even though he was sentenced to 25 years in prison, his parole would be delayed indefinitely unless he could prove he no longer posed a threat to society. The court recognized that Terry was someone who was a danger to the public and would likely reoffend if released. The Abbotsford killer was finally put away for good.
He'd be a guy that I'd want to put on the chair, to be honest.
No sentencing to death in Canada, and the longest term you can serve is 25 years, but that's how they keep these kinds of people in prison. If they deem through the courts that they're still a threat to the public, they will continue to serve their time in prison, and they can reapply for parole every year afterwards. So it can just continue to be denied, but unfortunately, in cases like this, the families have to go and fight to keep them in prison every single year. So they have to relive the torture
That's
of what happened to their loved ones every single time.
So that's like after 25 years, they have to go in every year?
Yes.
And he would definitely reoffend. Definitely.
Yep. So the courts determined that, and they said, no, you're not getting out.
So this was 96?
This was 97.
Yeah.
97.
Yep.
So what's that in...
So yeah, they'd be going through that right now, right? Because it's over 25 years.
We'll get to that in a little bit.
Oh, jeez.
In addition to the crimes Terry was arrested for already, he was later also convicted of 2 more assaults that he outlined in the letter thrown through the window of the house in Abbotsford. One occurred in September of 1994, where he claimed to have punched a woman in the face and dragged her to a secluded area, but she was able to escape. The second assault took place in August of 1995, where he once again hit a woman in the head with a baseball bat, stole her purse, and ran away, leaving her unconscious on the sidewalk. While incarcerated, he told a psychologist that he had killed 3 other women. Police looked into these cases that dated back to 1985, but they did not find any evidence of him being involved. Throughout the years, Terry tried to get parole several times, but was denied in each instance. The Parole Board of Canada rejected his application, stating that he was still a danger to the public and had not changed in terms of his exhibited behavior. Terry Driver spent over 24 years in prison. Originally, he was sent to Kent Institution, which is a maximum security prison near Agassiz, British Columbia. Around 2006, he was transferred to the Pacific Institution Regional Treatment Center in Abbotsford. This angered the families of the victims as it brought him physically closer to them. At some point, he was transferred to Mountain Institution, which is a medium security facility located in Agassiz, British Columbia as well, which would be the last place he would be alive at. On August 23, 2021, Terry was reported as having died in custody at the age of 56. His death was attributed to, quote, apparent natural causes, end quote, and there was no indication of foul play. While his death marked the end of his life, it did not diminish the lasting impact of his crimes on the victims, their families, or the community of Abbotsford. The murder of Tanya Smith, along with the assault of Misty Cockrell, sent shockwaves through the community of Abbotsford. The once safe town had been turned on its head, and the community needed to heal. The crimes committed by Terry Driver highlighted how the most horrific acts of violence can occur in places that seem the safest. The act shown in this case, from the taunting to the headstone being defaced, invoked a new level of fear only few people can speak to. In a positive light, Misty Cockrell made a powerful statement and said that being a victim of assault doesn't define her. Quote, "Victims are stigmatized to feel sorry for themselves forever, and it wasn't really my thing. I didn't feel sorry for myself." End quote. She worked as a volunteer for victim services for many years to help people whenever she could. She was working towards a degree in social work in 2009 and expected to graduate the following December. Misty's strength in overcoming her own trauma and speaking out became an inspiration for others who faced similar horrors. Ultimately, her message was that people can overcome their fear and experiences and not be a victim forever.
Damn, good for Misty.
I was going to say good for her.
Yeah.
She's a fighter. She's so strong.
The case of the Abbotsford killer is one of the most disturbing cases in Canadian history. What made this case so horrific wasn't only the brutal attack of two young teenagers, but also displayed the terrifying behavior of a predatory psychopath. His behavior during the case left a scar on the community, the families of the victims, and law enforcement. Ultimately, justice was served and a dangerous person was removed from the streets. However, a case like this will make you think twice about walking home late at night. Even if you think your neighborhood is safe, you truly don't know who is watching.
That's very true.
What do they do with bodies when people die in prison? Do they give them back to the family, or are they buried?
It'll definitely be the family's decision of the person. So in this case, it would have been his siblings or his mother that made the decision of what to do with his body afterwards. And if the family doesn't want it, I believe they have designated cemeteries for these kinds of people where they just get buried with probably no
They wouldn't cremate
headstone.
them?
They might. I don't know the whole process, but that would be up to correctional facilities.
Probably, yeah.
Their discretion.
I'm shocked that they moved him into Abbotsford.
So Correctional Services Canada actually issued a formal apology to the families for doing so.
Good.
But it
I
was
would have anywhere to put him.
it was
Come on.
like really right back to Abbotsford where he
Yeah.
wanted to be.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah.
So I think for me, when I was going through this case, like I mentioned before, the most shocking factor was the headstone being removed from the cemetery and placed on a car as an act of, I wouldn't say defiance, but just saying, hey, I'm still here. Don't mess with me.
Mm-hmm.
That to me, I have never, ever seen before in any case. Like
All the taunting, right? Like, and then that was just like the final drop there. It's, no, I'm smarter than you. I'm more powerful than you. I can do whatever I want and I'm going to show it.
Yeah, it's so crazy how nobody even saw him do that. Like, I imagine he had to bring some tools, like maybe a saw or something to cut that stone apart.
Yeah, it was kind of like a flat one. It wasn't like a really tall one that weighed like hundreds and hundreds of pounds. It was probably the size of a briefcase, if anyone knows what those things are still. But yeah, it was about the size of a briefcase. Still quite heavy, but clearly he was able to grab a crowbar, pry it up, deface it with pen, pencil, whatever he wrote on it, and then drop it on the car. There was one point in the investigation that somebody claimed to see somebody at a payphone right before police descended on the area. And she had said the person that left didn't look like Terry Driver. It looked like the original composite, the guy with the dark hair and the thinning hair. So that brings up a really interesting potential here that maybe, I don't think this was the case whatsoever because the DNA confirmed it. But at that point in the investigation, some people were probably like, I don't think it's Terry. I think it might be somebody else. And the police are just grabbing him and taking him for a run to the jail, essentially, because they're like, we're done with this case.
It was him.
But that's why you do these things in forensics and you don't rely solely on
Too many
witness
things matched
statements.
up.
There's too many issues with that, and eyewitness testimony is not reliable, and forensic evidence is concrete.
Well, with the bite and the fingerprint, you can't, like, that's right there. It's proof.
Yeah, I think he formulated a story to attempt to explain why he was why his DNA was found there, but he didn't want to admit to the killings.
Yeah, that
because
story was horrible.
Yeah.
Drove her to the hospital. Like,
Yeah, that's the
Come on.
worst part of the whole
Yeah.
thing.
And her wounds were insane. Like, she had a fractured skull, she had a hole in her head, and she had to get brain surgery or else she was going to die. And she somehow was able to stand up and walk all the way to the hospital. And
Adrenaline.
She lived. And she's still functioning fine today. Like,
with him having 2 young kids, how could he look at them every day, knowing that he's done these horrific things to all these other women and countless others?
that's the lack of remorse and guilt. He felt nothing when he did this. He might as well have gone to the store and bought a book or bought groceries. It's the same thing to him. Nothing matters to him at all. So that's how he can go home at the end of the night and sleep, because it does not matter to him.
Yep. Probably just had a wife and kids just to say, oh, normal life, right? Just,
Yep, absolutely insane.
Wow.
Pat, what are your opinions on this case, and what are your feelings? Like, what do you think about Terry Driver as an individual?
Well, I'm glad they caught this guy because he definitely would have continued his crimes. And good on the mom for outing her son. I wonder if it was a tough decision or if she knew automatically this is the right thing to do.
I'd say it was tough because it sounded like they were caught off guard, right?
Yeah,
Of how he presented himself.
Yeah, I think they had an argument, or the brother had an argument with Terry kind of during the time of, like, he had already committed the murder and hadn't been found yet. He basically said to his brother, "Don't mess with me. You don't know what I'm capable of. None of you know what I'm capable of doing." So that's the only thing that was kind of telling during that point in time. And again, hindsight's 2020. You look back at that and you're like, oh, that makes perfect sense. But
More than a red flag.
Yeah, I wonder if they confronted Terry before calling the police, like asking to his face.
they didn't, because Terry did not know why the police showed up. And the police left the fact that his mother was the one who called in saying, hey, that voice on the radio sounds like my son. That's Terry Driver. He lives at this address. Go ahead and get him.
So it probably doesn't sound like they were too close at this point.
Maybe not. But in terms of his actual personal life, I don't know too much about that. There really wasn't much online about that portion of it. And it could be kept secret, or it could be kept private for obvious reasons. The family don't want to have anything to do with it anymore. Who knows?
I don't think it has to do with like relationship though. I think she could have very well loved him very much. But with all that proof and hearing that tape, she had no choice, right?
Family also received $10,000 as a reward for turning their son into.
It would probably weigh highly on your conscience knowing that you could be helping somebody, but not just because it's somebody you love.
Yeah.
Well, and that $10,000, I'm sure, went to charity, went to his kids, his wife.
Maybe. Very well.
I'm sure she didn't just keep it and be like, haha, this is what I get for turning in my kid, right?
Yeah, it probably wouldn't feel very good to have $10,000 in your son's name.
Yeah. I just don't understand how it kind of all bubbled out at once. Like, he claims to have killed people 1985. He said there were 3 stabbings that happened back then, where he changes his MO and kind of outlines a little bit of that portion in the note that I will be posting in the show notes, as I mentioned before. But this also could be a cry for attention as well. He just wants people to focus back on him because people kind of forgot about him. It's been 10 years at that point in time, and he hadn't received a lot of publicity for the most part, and he could be just craving that kind of attention. And if he's like, oh yeah, I'm responsible for these murders too, that brings him back in the spotlight, which is what he wants.
Yep. Wants to be relevant.
It's that incessant need for attention from the public that he craves, or at least it seems that way.
Yeah, it's a sad story overall. Like, even with Terry, because I'm sure there was things throughout his life. Like, I don't think you were born evil. I feel like there was probably some aspects during his childhood that made him this way. That's my take, at least. So I feel like, I don't know, I'm not gonna say it could have been prevented. Like, there's obviously a lot of aspects, but who knows, maybe that one like blow to the head he had maybe during a football game, or that one time his mom disapproved of him or something, which gave him a disdain for women. Like, who knows? Like, little things like that could all contribute to a giant crime like this down the line.
Right.
So it's like sad for like if you're a child being exposed to those kind of traumas. Not saying that's the case, but who knows?
Well, agree to disagree with that, right? Because look at Misty, like a victim of a horrible attack. And now look at her. She's like graduating school. She was able to take the stand with Terry in the room. As much as environment and traumatic things happening in your past shouldn't define you, right?
Let me get back to this question. Do you think somebody could be born evil, or do you think he was built this way?
It's a good question. It's incredibly difficult. And I feel like psychologists all over the world constantly try to find the answer to that question because it's so difficult. There's so many different factors. But I think at the end of the day, I don't think anybody is born evil. It's all learned experiences, the environment they grow up in. It's all a culmination of experience in life that leads them down a certain path. Because if you think of it this way, I'll get a little philosophical here. Each and every single person that has ever existed on Earth is unique. No two people will ever have the same experiences throughout an entire course of their life. So that makes everybody different. In a case like this, if you're born blank slate, let's put it that way, certain people being exposed to certain things at different times lead to them going down a different path compared to somebody else. They could be starting at the same point in time, but one could go down the path of a doctor. One could go down the path of being an astronaut, and then the other goes down the path of a psychopath. I think it's still a culmination of everything, not just specific little things.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if you could go back and just change that one little thing. It's like the butterfly effect. You could have a totally different life now, be successful. But no, we had to have a tragedy like this unfold.
But then that's Jared's point, though. It's not just like one little thing, right? Like it's so many different things happen in your life, and that's what shapes you.
Yeah, it's a culmination of bad choices. Like I could make a bad choice and not become a murderer. But if I continue to make bad choices, I could very well become a murderer.
Yeah, and it could be bad choices or just bad experiences that you have no control over. Like you could just be exposed to something and you don't have a choice. Like the difference between growing up in a home with nurturing parents or a home with parents who don't care about you whatsoever. That's something that's out of a child's control. They don't have a choice in the matter. And that will lead them to behave a certain way.
Well, I wonder if maybe that ADHD argument has a little bit to do with it then.
It definitely makes them more susceptible,
Impulsive.
maybe. But also I think it was primarily used as an excuse, which...
Oh, definitely.
It was definitely, I don't know anybody with OCD or ADHD or Tourette's syndrome that feels impulses to have sex with unconscious bodies. Like to me, that's just absurd. I think at the end of the day, though, people like this that lack any type of remorse and they don't care about what they do to other people are extremely dangerous. And it's just fortunate in this case, this person was caught before they could kill any more people. All right, are you guys ready for some trivia?
Let's do it.
I think I got you last time.
I was
didn't
going to say, I need to redeem myself
sweep.
and at least get one tonight.
Clean sweep them, fellas.
So our standings are at 2 wins for Pat and 2 wins for Brando. So you guys are tied currently. All right, first question. How many people are victims of homicide in Canada in a given year? Is it A, 80 to 100, B, 300 to 350, C, 700 to 800, or D, 1,500 to 1,800?
This is in a given year. I really don't want to have to go with D, but I feel like it's a lot of people, but that's a big jump from C to D there, like the 700 to 800 and then almost doubling that. I just feel like 700 to 800 is it's like not enough, right? Which is sad to think about, but I'm going C.
I was between B and C, but because you said C, I'm just going to say B.
The correct answer is C, 700 to 800. According to Statistics Canada, 778 people were victims of homicide in Canada in 2023. 2023 is the most recent year that I could find. In the previous year, starting at 2019, the numbers were 691, 765, 801, and 882, respectively. All right, question number 2. In which province do the highest number of homicides take place? Is it A, British Columbia, B, Saskatchewan, C, Alberta, or D, Ontario?
I'm going to say Ontario.
Darn, I was going to go Ontario as well. D.
You're both correct. D, Ontario. Statistics Canada indicates that 262 homicides occurred in the province in 2023, followed by British Columbia with 123. Question number 3. Which city has the highest homicide rate in Ontario? Is it A, London, B, Ottawa, C, Toronto, or D, Windsor?
Toronto.
I'm going to go Toronto.
The correct answer is Toronto. Once again, Statistics Canada indicates that 116 of the 262 homicides that occurred in Ontario occurred in Toronto. So that's 3 for Brando, 2 for Pat. Pat, you put up a valiant effort. I commend you.
I'll be back next week.
That is a win for Brando. So we're sitting at 3 for Brando and 2 for Pat. And that's going to end our podcast for the night. If you want your story featured or have any ideas for the show, please email us at strangeandundecided@gmail.com. For next week, we haven't decided yet, but we're going to be working on a UFO case. So stay tuned if that's something you're interested in. As always, thanks for listening.
And
good night.